At 7:14 a.m., my security cameras didn't just ping, they screamed. 5 alerts, 5 angles, 1 truth. I was looking at a formation I hadn't seen since overseas. HOA guards, fake engineers, armed with forged documents and real stupidity. They thought they were hunting a lonely black homeowner on a mountain. They didn't know, they just triggered the Marines. I'm Marcus Kane, retired gunnery sergeant, and I earned every inch of these 14 acres with 70-hour weeks and blood equity. But peace? Peace is a delicate thing. And the beautiful HOA president in the crimson red blazer who sent these men thought she could take it. She was about to learn why you never corner a Marine on his own land, especially when he's got 4 brothers on speed dial. I've lived on this mountain long enough to understand the language of silence. Out here, quiet isn't emptiness. Quiet is certainty. It's the hum of wind cutting across the ridge, the slow breathing of pines, gravel settling under its own weight. It's the kind of quiet a man earns after too many years spent in places where silence never lasted long enough. For months, that silence had been good to me. Morning coffee tasted the way coffee should taste, like something earned, not rushed. The house I built with my own hands stood solid against the cold, every beam placed with the same precision. I learned framing structures in 29 palms before my first deployment. My cameras rarely lit up except for deer, the occasional bear, or one stubborn fox that seemed determined to examine every lens on my property. I'm a black man who clawed my way through the Marine Corps on discipline and grit. Retired as gunnery sergeant after 22 years of service that took me from Fallujah to Helmand province. I bought this land with my retirement savings and sweat, clearing brush and pouring foundation in weather that would have sent most men back to the city. But peace is a delicate thing, and on this land, it never breaks softly. That morning started the way most mornings do, a slow stretch of daylight pushing over the ridge, the kind of soft orange glow that makes even a tired man feel grateful to wake up again. I had just stepped into the kitchen and poured the first cup of coffee when the security system chimed, except it didn't sound like it normally does. Normally, it's one soft tone, a gentle nudge telling me a squirrel or a shadow wandered past the lens. This time, 5 alerts hit at once. The whole system lit up like a Christmas tree wired to a car battery. The screen on the wall flickered alive before I even touched it, showing 5 red triangles pulsing along the perimeter of my gate. 5 cameras, 5 different angles, all active, all screaming for attention. That alone was enough to turn the air sharp, but what I saw when the feed stabilized, that was what pulled the old instincts out of storage. It wasn't wildlife, it wasn't hikers, and it damn sure wasn't anybody who had a right to be there. My gate, the one I built, welded, sealed, and reinforced myself, was surrounded. 3 men in matching dark uniforms were positioned like they were setting up a checkpoint, not standing casually, not wandering positioned like they were waiting for a signal. 2 more lingered near the roadside easement, wearing reflective vests with engineering printed across the back in crooked, peeling letters. Even before the Zoom function kicked in, I knew those letters didn't belong to any county official. And what really got my attention wasn't the uniforms, it was the spacing. Equal distance between bodies, eyes moving independently. One man watching the tree line, another watching the gate hinges, another staring directly into the nearest camera lens like he wanted me to know he could see me. That wasn't random behavior. That wasn't a friendly visit. That was a formation one I'd seen in far hotter countries under far worse skies. I set my coffee down, didn't even realize my hand had tightened around the mug until I heard the ceramic strain. There are moments in a man's life when he knows something has shifted, not in the world, but in himself. Something old wakes up, something he thought he left behind. Standing in front of that screen, I felt that shift settle deep in my bones. Those men at my gate, they weren't here to talk. They weren't here to ask questions. They came to take something. And they thought, God bless their optimism, that I was alone. I reached for the panel beside the screen, tapped the layout button, and watched the feed expand into a 7-camera mosaic. My entire southern perimeter glowed alive under the morning sun. A slow breath escaped me before I even knew I was holding it. "All right," I muttered. "Let's see what you idiots want. Because silence may be sacred, but on my land, silence is something I defend. I've dealt with trouble before. The kind that comes with sandstorms, bad intel, and people who don't knock before they shoot. But there's a different kind of trouble that comes in a pressed shirt and a rehearsed smile. It walks like authority, talks like procedure, and hopes you don't look closely enough to see the rot underneath." That morning, as I watched the men gather at my gate, I recognized that second kind instantly. One of the guards, older, thick-necked, sweating through his uniform even in the mountain cold, stepped forward and lifted a bullhorn. His voice cracked through the canyon like he owned the place. "Mr. Kane, you are required to open this gate for infrastructure inspection. Failure to comply will result in escalation." Infrastructure inspection? That was a new one. HOA folks normally hide behind phrases like community standards or visual compliance, but this was attempted authority they didn't have and never would. I zoomed the camera in on the man's left hand. He was holding a document laminated, glossy, trimmed, too clean to be county issued. Across the top, in thick, bold letters, Order of Excess, SE Section FORTYONEB. I'd never heard of Section 41B, and I've lived in this county longer than the HOA has existed. But more importantly, counties don't laminate anything. Only people trying too hard do that. The bullhorn blared again. "This is a mandatory procedural check. You are to unlock the gate immediately." He tried to sound official, but authority isn't in the voice. It's in the weight behind it. And these men, they had no weight, just uniforms and borrowed confidence. I leaned a little closer to the screen and spoke under my breath. "Let's have a look at your magic paperwork." I tapped a command on the console, activating the audio pickup from camera 3, the one closest to the guard. Static, crackled, then cleared just enough for me to catch the conversation between the guard with the bullhorn and the man standing beside him. The second man wore a vest that read "Engineering Staff." His clipboard was cheap plastic, the kind sold in office stores by the dozen. He spoke in a soft, hurried voice. "Make sure he sees the seal this time, and point to the signature. It needs to look official." That was all I needed to hear. I pressed the intercom button built into my doorway, waited half a second, and let my voice roll out of the speakers mounted near the gate. "Gentlemen, before you embarrass yourselves further, hold that page a little higher. I want a good look at the forgery." They froze. Then, the guard barked into his bullhorn again, louder this time, as if volume could hold his authority together. "This document is recognized by the North Hollow Community Development Board, and absolutely no legal entity in Pine Creek County." I cut in. I could almost hear their shoulders tighten. The engineer flipped his clipboard, pretending to check something important. The guard flicked his eyes toward the SUV behind him, as if waiting for instructions. There it was, the first crack in their formation. People who carry real authority don't look around for permission. These men, they were puppets, waiting for a tug on the string. I took a slow sip of coffee and continued. "If you want to trespass, at least bring documents printed by someone who owns a spell check." One of the guards turned, whispering sharply at the others. Another shielded the fake paper behind his leg as though hiding it would make it real. I zoomed in again, letting the system capture every facial twitch, every nervous glance, every lie they were preparing to swallow. "I'll give you boys one chance," I said calmly. "Put the props away, walk back to your vehicles, and pretend this morning was just a stupid idea you'll never try again." The bullhorn didn't come back on immediately. That meant they were stalling, calculating, waiting to see if I was bluffing. But I wasn't the one at the gate. I wasn't the one holding counterfeit paperwork, and I sure as hell wasn't the one trespassing. In the silence that followed, a cold truth sank in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't HOA overreach. This was the opening move of something bigger, and they had no idea they'd already lost. If there's one thing life has taught me, both overseas and back home, it's that real authority moves with certainty. Counterfeit authority always hesitates before it lies. And that was exactly what I was watching at my gate. The guard with the bullhorn lowered it, pretending to review the order of access. But the man behind him, the one in the reflective vest, he wasn't pretending anything. He was pacing like a kid caught cheating on a test, eyes darting across the property line as if hoping a real county truck might magically appear and back their story. That vest of his caught the morning sun just right, letting me see the stitching along the edges. It wasn't professionally made. Loose threads curled along the seams. County gear doesn't fray like that. Not on day one. Then I spotted the clipboard. A cheap, flimsy slab of plastic with a bright red sticker reading engineering slapped on the back. The sticker wasn't aligned, tilted almost 7 degrees. Little things matter in situations like this. Tiny cracks in a facade that's trying too hard to look solid. The man adjusted his sunglasses and tapped his finger nervously on the top sheet. He hadn't even written anything, not a single note. The page was blank. County engineers write constantly pressure readings, runoff data, gradient percentages. A blank sheet at a supposed inspection? That wasn't just sloppy, it was insulting. I took another slow sip of coffee and let the steam curl past my face. "Let's see what kind of circus act you boys brought today," I muttered. Just as I said that, a second engineer stepped out of the SUV. You could tell he'd never climbed anything taller than a curb. He walked with that stiff, upright posture of a man who'd watched too many documentaries about real field workers. He carried a laser measurer brand new, still shining, but wasn't pointing it at anything meaningful, just waving it around like a flashlight at a scout camp. Then came the part that made me shake my head. He crouched down carefully, very carefully, like his knees hadn't done that motion in decades, and placed a tiny orange flag into the dirt. He didn't press it. He didn't anchor it. He just set it there gently, like a decorative toothpick on a cupcake. The wind knocked it over in 3 seconds. He scrambled to pick it back up before anyone noticed. He didn't realize every camera on my property could zoom close enough to count the pores on his forehead. I hit the speaker again. "You boys practicing for a parade? Or is this what passes for engineering in North Hollow?" One of the guards flinched so hard he almost dropped his bullhorn. The older engineer raised his voice, trying desperately to fill the role he'd been handed. "Mr. Kane, we are conducting a soil gradient survey for," I cut him off, "for a gated community that doesn't own a single inch beyond its fence line." "Interesting." The guard whispered something harsh at him. The engineer's eyes widened like he suddenly realized just how much trouble he was standing in. He took a step back toward the SUV. Then, rookie mistake, he turned his clipboard just enough for my cameras to catch the header on the top page. "County land use devising." The second I leaned forward, letting the feed zoom even closer. Perfect. I pressed the intercom and let my voice roll out, slow and cold. "Hey, Einstein, look at your clipboard." The engineer froze. "You spelled division wrong." I spelled it out slowly, deliberately. D-I-V-I-S-I-O-N. He looked down. I watched the blood drain from his face like someone pulled a plug. I continued tone dropping into that quiet register men only use when the truth has weight. Forging government documents is a felony. No shouting, no anger, just fact. I let it sit for a breath, then delivered the finishing blow. "And you boys aren't even doing it well. Walk away now, or that typo is going to be Exhibit A in court." The engineer's hand trembled. He hid the clipboard behind his leg like a child caught stealing candy. The guard shifted, whispering urgently, confidence leaking out of them like air from a punctured tire. Standing in my doorway, watching them falter without me taking a single step outside, I realized something important. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was panic. Their panic. And they had no idea the worst part hadn't even started yet. There's a certain point in any confrontation when you can tell the other side has decided to stop pretending. For the men at my gate, that point arrived the moment the engineer hid his clipboard like a guilty schoolboy. The guards stiffened, exchanged glances, and something shifted in their posture. Their hesitation faded, replaced by a kind of stubborn determination that only comes from two things: fear and orders. And fear, mixed with orders, is a dangerous combination. I watched the man with the bullhorn step aside, placing it on the hood of the SUV. He wiped his palms on his pants, squared his shoulders, and nodded to the two guards beside him. That nod was all I needed to see. Whatever they were about to do next, they had planned it long before they stepped onto my road. One guard, tall, shaved head, probably security at a mall somewhere, walked to the side gate, but this time he wasn't pretending to inspect anything. He reached into the pocket of his vest and pulled out a set of bolt cutters, heavy ones, industrial. He tested their weight, glanced once at the other guard, and then clamped down on the lock of my secondary access gate. The steel shuddered. Not enough to break. Not yet, but enough to tell me they weren't bluffing anymore. The HOA had crossed over from annoying into criminal, with the ease of someone stepping across a puddle. The second guard approached my fence line with a different purpose. He didn't try to rip anything down. He examined it carefully, studying the placement, the wiring, the corner supports. He was looking for a weakness. Not random, not sloppy, methodical. Behind them, the fake engineers were no longer pretending to measure drainage. They were scanning, filming, documenting not for the sake of accuracy, but for ammunition, for a story they could manipulate later. One of them lifted his phone and aimed it toward my home. Not the gate, my home. That was enough for me. I tapped the intercom again. Filming my residence without consent is another crime to add to your growing list. He froze mid-record, lowered the phone, but didn't pocket it. Not fear, defiance. The kind of defiance that comes from being told you're safe by someone higher up the chain. I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and exhaled slowly. "All right," I murmured. "So that's how you want to play it." The man with the bolt cutters braced himself again. This time, he positioned the tool deeper into the lock and put his whole body weight behind the cut. The sound echoed, a sharp metallic crack carried across the morning air. He wasn't through, but he was close. The other guard took that as a signal and moved to climb the fence, not clumsy, not careless. He picked a section well away from view, checking the edges for wiring. He wasn't improvising. He knew how fences work. He knew what to avoid. He looked like a man who had done this before. And that told me something important. This wasn't just HOA security. This was people with training. Maybe not military, but someone had instructed them. Someone had told them where to stand, what to say, and now how to breach. They weren't here to talk. They were here to enter. I straightened up, set my coffee down, and reached for the small touchpad on my wall, the one controlling the outer zone tactical presets. A row of green lights blinked to life. Earlier that morning, before the sun had fully risen, I'd taken a quiet walk along my road with a small steel rake. Just a minute here and there, loosening gravel in a few strategic patches, letting a fine layer of silt settle on top. Not sabotage, not traps, just landscaping, tactical landscaping. The kind a man does when he knows the day ahead won't be peaceful. Now, as the guard climbed the fence and placed his boot exactly where I expected, I watched the gravel shift. His footing faltered not dramatically, not cartoonishly, just enough for his weight to carry wrong. His knee buckled, and he dropped hard onto one elbow with a grunt. The bolt cutter guard looked back, startled. I pressed the intercom again, voice smooth as cold water. "Careful now. The ground's not as friendly as it looks." But the truth was sharper. They were no longer trespassing by accident. They were breaching with intent. And that meant everything was about to escalate fast. I've always believed a man's land should work with him, not against him. Some folks decorate their yards. I prepare mine, not with traps, not with anything that could get an innocent person hurt, just with the kind of subtle adjustments that make sense in the mountains and become very inconvenient for trespassers. That morning, before the sun had fully pushed over the ridge, I'd already walked the property line. A shovel here, a rake there, a little water poured into the gravel where runoff naturally pulled overnight. If anyone asked, it was dust control. Standard practice out here. But for men trying to breach my gate, it was the difference between balance and gravity winning a small argument. The guard who'd faltered on the fence tried to recover quickly. He wasn't weak, I'll give him that. He rolled onto his knees, tested the ground again, and tried a second time. But this time, His boot landed squarely on the patch I'd softened an hour earlier. The silt shifted like a whisper. His foot slid half an inch, just enough for his center of gravity to betray him. He dropped again, catching himself with both hands. No injury, no dramatic fall, just a quiet reminder from the earth. You don't belong here. The man with the bolt cutters gritted his teeth and put one final heave on my gate lock. The metal finally gave way with a strained groan. He straightened, triumphant, and tried to step backward. Tried. But the moment his heel met the softened gravel, the ground slid just slightly. A tiny shift, barely a tremor. But when a man is carrying his full weight backward with his legs already tense, a tiny shift is all it takes. His heel shot out. He windmilled once, twice, and landed hard on his backside with a grunt that echoed through the trees. Again, no injury, nothing lasting, just dignity taking a hit. I pressed a button on the intercom. Told you, boys. Mountain ground's tricky when you don't know it. The engineers exchanged nervous looks. One raised his phone as if recording would magically give them legal authority. His hand was shaking. I blew out a slow breath through my nose. If these men had been legitimate officials, I would have offered water, maybe even help, but they weren't. They were trespassers playing dress-up. And trespassers don't get kindness on my land. They get recorded. As the guard in the vest tried once more to climb the fence, his partner, the bolt cutter man, decided to shift tactics. He took a step toward the narrow service gap near the utility pole, a known weak spot in cheaper fencing. He didn't know mine wasn't cheap. He planted his foot firmly, but again, too close to the soft patch. The ground slid under him like a rug pulled from the corner. He twisted, trying to catch himself, but momentum won. His shoulder struck the dirt with a dull thud. He cursed loudly. The engineer nearest him scrambled forward to help, but as he jogged toward the fallen guard, his right boot hit the same loosened edge. He didn't fall outright, he just stumbled, arms pinwheeling, clipboard flying out of his hand. The clipboard landed face first, the laminated counterfeit page skidding across the gravel like a bad credit card. I almost laughed. Almost. I don't enjoy watching a man struggle. But when a group of grown adults invades private land with forged documents and an attitude problem, when they fake authority to bully someone they think is isolated, well, the mountain has its own way of teaching respect. One of the guards shouted, "Careful! The ground's unstable!" I pressed the intercom again. Only unstable for people who don't belong on it. The man who dropped the clipboard finally picked it up, brushing off dust as if that would fix the spelling error, staring him in the face. Across the feed, I saw shoulders tightening, eyes narrowing, formation faltering. Their confidence, that puffed-up, manufactured authority, was cracking. Not because I threatened them, not because I stepped outside, but because the land itself refused to cooperate with them. And men like this, men who count on bluster and paperwork and intimidation, don't do well when something bigger than them reminds them they're not in control. That's when I whispered to myself, time to even the odds. I pulled my phone from my pocket. No panic, no rush. Just a decision made by a man who's been through enough battles to know when the line has officially been crossed. I opened the old Marine group chat, the one that hadn't seen life since our reunion barbecue last July. 4 names. 4 men I trusted more than gravity. I typed 3 words, gate breached, hostiles, and hit send. When you live alone in the mountains, you get used to a certain kind of quiet. Not the peaceful kind, the alert kind. The kind that settles right before something moves. A branch, a shadow, a stranger's footstep. That was the quiet filling my home now. My phone screen dimmed, showing the message I just sent. Gate breached. Hostiles. Short, precise language my brothers understood, without debate. I set the phone face down on the counter and returned my eyes to the mosaic of security feeds. 5 cameras, 5 angles, 5 pieces of a puzzle that painted a clear picture. The HOA had abandoned the bluff. They were now fully committed. The guard with the bolt cutters was back on his feet. rubbing his shoulder and cursing at the broken lock like it was personally responsible for his bad decisions. Another guard scanned the fence line again, slower this time, more deliberate, no longer as confident, but twice as determined. The fake engineers whispered urgently to each other. One pointed toward the ridge, another pointed toward my front door. They didn't know what to do. Good. Indecision is a battlefield all its own. I tapped the side of the monitor, zooming in on their formation. They were tightening ranks instinctively, standing closer together as if proximity might compensate for lack of authority. I'd seen that posture before, not from soldiers, but from men pretending to be them. Pretenders always huddle. Real professionals spread out. I stepped away from the screen long enough to refill my coffee. Age teaches you not to waste adrenaline. Panic wastes breath. Calm sharpens everything. By the time the mug was warm in my hands again, the first reply buzzed on my phone. En route. 10 out. No punctuation, no hesitation, just commitment. A second buzz followed. Copy. Grab Sam. Then a third. What did they break this time? I smirked. Even in tense situations, Miguel found humor, the same humor that kept us sane overseas. A fourth and final message lit up the screen. Sam on my way. No talking. Just moving. That one made the hair on my arm stand up. Sam never talked much, but when he did, he meant every syllable. I placed the phone back down. The quiet in my house felt different now, heavier, like the air itself was taking a breath. Outside, the guards regrouped. One climbed halfway up my fence again, testing each foothold more carefully. This time, he avoided the softened gravel smart, but too late. They'd already crossed the line. They just didn't understand how badly. The man with the bullhorn, perhaps sensing their momentum slipping, grabbed it again and shouted, "Mr. Kane, you are now impeding a community mandated." He didn't get to finish, because at that exact moment, I heard it. Faint, far away, but unmistakable. A deep, throaty rumble rolling through the pines. Not fast like a sports car, not smooth like a suburban SUV. This was heavier, meaner. A diesel engine tuned by a man who doesn't believe in quiet exits or gentle arrivals. A second rumble followed. Then, a third. I stepped closer to the window, though I couldn't yet see anything but tree line. Still, I knew. I knew the sound of my brothers before I ever saw them. The HOA guards didn't, but I did. That rumble was a promise, a reminder, a warning to anyone foolish enough to mistake me for a man who stands alone. And, for the first time since the morning began, I felt the mountain itself shift, like it recognized the approach of something dangerous but righteous. The storm was coming. And it wasn't coming for me. The sound rolled through the valley long before the trucks came into view. A low, deliberate growl that didn't rush, didn't apologize, didn't hide. Engines like that belong to men who've spent too many years driving machines that weren't meant for comfort. Men who know the road by feel, not by map. Men who only show up when things have officially crossed the line. The HOA guards didn't understand what they were hearing. Not yet. But I did. A grin crept across my face, slow, the kind a man earns. On the camera feed, one of the fake engineers froze. His head tilted like he couldn't place the sound. Another guard looked toward the tree line, his hand hovering near the pepper spray on his belt like it was going to save him. It wouldn't, not from what was coming. The rumble grew deeper, louder, closer. A hawk lifted off a pine branch in the distance, startled by the vibration in the ground. The gravel road leading up to my property trembled like a drum being struck from below. Then the first truck appeared. Matte black Ford F-250, Super Duty, lifted enough to clear boulders, not speed bumps. Mud terrain tires chewing through the gravel like it offended them. Derek was driving. I recognized that hood dent. He got it in Utah after trying to tow a fallen tree with just momentum. Didn't work, but the tree lost. Behind him, riding shotgun, was Shane, arms folded, sunglasses on. Jaw set like someone carved it out of a rock that owed him money. The HOA guard straightened instinctively, not out of courage, but confusion. A moment later, the second vehicle rounded the bend, an old Jeep Wrangler. Olive drab paint chipped from years of off-roading. No roof, no doors, roll cage exposed. The kind of Jeep people in cities call unsafe, and men like us call freedom. Miguel was behind the wheel, chewing sunflower seeds like this was a Sunday drive. Sam rode beside him, silent, unreadable, coiled like a spring. Both trucks slowed as they approached the HOA convoy, not braking hard, not swerving, just easing into position with the deliberate confidence of men who'd done this kind of thing before. The HOA guards stepped back automatically, creating space they didn't know they were giving. The F-250 stopped first. All 4 doors opened in the same second, a maneuver we'd done 1,000 times exiting MRAPs overseas. Not rushed, not aggressive, just efficient. Boots hit gravel. Thump, 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 thump. The kind of sound that says, "We're here." And the situation just changed. Derek adjusted his gloves, cracked his neck once, and surveyed the scene like he was taking inventory of a problem he was about to fix permanently. Shane stepped out next, moving with that slow, dangerous patience of a man who's been hit before and didn't mind hitting back harder. Miguel hopped out of the Jeep before it fully stopped rolling, seeds still in his mouth, grinning like he'd been waiting all month for something to break the monotony. Sam wasn't in a hurry. He climbed out quietly, checked his surroundings in a full sweep, then closed the Jeep door even though it didn't have one. That's just who Sam was. The HOA guards stared. The fake engineers took a collective step backward, as if their laminated documents might somehow shield them from what they were looking at. I stepped outside, then slowly, letting the screen door ease shut behind me. Sunlight washed over everything. Dust hung in the air. The morning held its breath. Derek was the first to speak. Not loudly, not aggressively, just plainly. "Marcus," he said with a nod, "looks like you've got a pest problem." I kept my face neutral, but inside, the knot that had been building in my chest all morning eased. "They cut my gate," I replied. "Came with forged documents. Tried to breach." Miguel whistled softly. "Man, HOA sure got bold this year." Shane tilted his head toward the guards. "Which one's the smart one in charge?" None of the guards answered, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't decide who would risk speaking first. Sam finally stepped forward. His voice was quiet, calm, and somehow more threatening than any shout. "Step away from the fence." 4 simple words, and every man on the HOA side felt them. They didn't step back right away. Pride can be a stubborn thing, but their bodies told the truth. Shoulders shrinking, eyes dropping, hands hovering near belts in a way that said they were reconsidering every decision that led them to this exact moment. The Marines were here, and the balance of power had shifted entirely. The thing about Marines is this: we don't have to yell to be loud, and we don't have to touch a man to move him. Real authority doesn't bark, it stands. The HOA guards expected a confrontation measured in volume, but what they got was formation. Derek took the forward position immediately. He didn't announce it, didn't gesture. He just stepped into the space between my gate and the intruder's boots, planted shoulder-width apart, hands loose at his sides, the kind of stance that tells the world, you take one more step toward my friend, and your day ends differently. Shane moved left wide angle, covering the fence line where the guard had attempted to climb earlier. He scanned the tree line, then the ground, then the guards themselves, measured, purposeful, not one wasted movement. Miguel drifted right casual as a man choosing a seat at a diner. But his eyes were sharp, calculating angles, distances, escape paths. Anyone watching closely would realize the casual walk was a tactic relaxed posture designed to shrink tension but give him full control of the flank. And Sam didn't move fast, didn't move big. He simply stepped forward, hands behind his back, chin tilted slightly downward, as though he was already disappointed by what he saw. Sam was the kind of man whose silence made other men reconsider their life choices. The HOA guards weren't up against muscle. They were up against experience. And experience is heavier than any weapon. One of the guards, the bolt cutter man, tried to reassert himself. He puffed his chest, lifted his chin, and addressed Sam with the authority he wished he had. "We're conducting a lawful inspection," he said, voice wobbling despite his best effort. Sam didn't blink. "On whose authority?" The guard hesitated. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Derek let out a small breath, the kind that almost sounded like a laugh, but wasn't. Miguel picked up the clipboard the fake engineer had dropped earlier. He held it up with 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "Boys," he said, wiggling the page for emphasis, "you spelled division wrong." The HOA guards stared at the word like they were seeing it for the first time. Miguel grinned, tossed the clipboard back onto the gravel, and said, "If you're gonna fake a felony, at least use spell check." Shane stepped closer to the bolt-cutter guard, not invading space, just nudging the boundary of comfort. "Cutting a man's gate," Shane said softly. "That's not civil enforcement. That's criminal mischief. You really want to add trespassing and document fraud to that list?" The guard swallowed hard. The fake engineers looked at each other, visibly debating whether to run, faint, or apologize. The bullhorn guard raised the device halfway, then lowered it again when he realized every Marine eye had shifted in unison toward him. 4 sets of eyes, 4 different stories behind them, but one message: don't. That was when the HOA formation broke. Not physically, mentally. You can see the exact second a man realizes he's outmatched. It shows in the shoulders. First they sag, then the jaw loosens. Eyes flick left, right, anywhere except forward. The HOA guards didn't just lose ground. They lost conviction. Derek took 1 step forward. That was all. 1 step. For the HOA, it was an earthquake. The second engineer dropped his measuring tool. The first one backed up so quickly he tripped on his own boot. The guard who'd tried to cut my lock instinctively placed a hand on his holster, not to draw, just to touch something familiar. Bad choice. Sam's voice cut through the air like gravel under a slow tire. "Don't reach for anything." The guard froze. Shane leaned slightly toward me, speaking just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Marcus, you want us to remove them from your property?" I didn't answer right away because something interesting was happening on the security feed. All the HOA men, every single one, had unconsciously stepped back behind the broken gate line. Not because I ordered them to, not because the law told them to, because their instincts told them, these men are not the ones you challenge. Derek took another slow step forward. "You've got 30 seconds, he said. "Clear the line." The HOA guards exchanged a series of panicked glances. Some began inching backward, but pride is a stubborn disease. And one man, the same fake engineer who dropped his clipboard earlier, suddenly snapped. His face went red, his breathing sharpened. He shoved past the others and marched straight towards Sam. "Get out of my way," he barked, voice cracking with fear and anger. "You don't get to tell us." He didn't finish. He stepped into Sam's space and pushed him both palms square in the chest. Sam didn't move. Not an inch. It was like the engineer had shoved a stone pillar buried 10 feet into the ground. The man blinked, stunned, and that's when Sam moved. Not aggressively, not violently, just pure, disciplined self-defense. Sam's right hand snapped onto the man's wrist. The instant contact was made. He rotated, shifted his weight, and in less than a second, the engineer was face down in the gravel arm, immobilized, legs kicking, yelping in pain. No strikes, no excessive force, just textbook restraint, the kind drilled into Marines long before rifles ever touched their hands. The HOA guards recoiled, even the bullhorn hit the dirt. Sam leaned down, voice low and steady. "You touch me. That's assault. Don't move." The engineer whimpered. Okay. Let go." "You're breaking my arm." Sam didn't increase pressure, didn't decrease it. He held exactly as much as needed. Derek glanced at me, eyebrow raised. "Well," he said, "there's your probable cause." And just like that, the HOA's fate was sealed. The engineer was still whimpering under Sam's restraint when I reached for the radio panel mounted beside my porch door. I flipped the external channel on, letting the intercom record every second of the chaos outside. Evidence. Always evidence. The HOA guards were frozen not by force, but by realization. They'd crossed a line they didn't even understand. And now they were standing face to face with men who knew exactly where that line was drawn. Derek kept his stance at the front, eyes scanning the road. He spoke without looking back. "Lawson's close." I didn't ask how he knew. When you've served long enough with someone, you learn to trust the instincts they don't bother explaining. Sam kept the engineer pinned, but not painfully, unless the man kept thrashing, which he did. "Stop moving," Sam warned again. The engineer didn't stop. He squealed, legs kicking like a flipped turtle. Shane shook his head. "Guy assaults a Marine? Then acts surprised he gets held down." "That's new," Miguel smirked, spit a sunflower seed hole toward a rock, and added, "They don't make trespassers like they used to." The remaining HOA guards tried to regroup. The bullhorn man finally found his voice, but panic had crept into it now. This is an HOA inspection. You can't restrain." I stepped forward just enough for the mic on my collar to catch my voice clean. He laid hands on one of my guests. "On my property, after cutting my gate, that's assault, destruction of property, and trespassing." The bullhorn man swallowed. He knew it. We all did. Then we heard it. Tires on gravel, not hurried, authoritative. A vehicle driven by someone who arrived expecting to end arguments, not join them. Sheriff Lawson's SUV rounded the bend. Brown and white, clean decals, a push bar that had seen real service, engine quieting into a deep idle that meant business. He stepped out slowly, hat under one arm, notebook in the other, expression carved from Colorado granite. He scanned the scene once, broken lock in the dirt, Marines in formation, HOA guards sweating like overworked air conditioners, and Sam pinning one engineer to the ground with the serenity of a man holding down paperwork. Lawson sighed. The kind of sigh a man gives when he's already predicting the paperwork. "All right," he said. "Someone want to tell me why I was told to bring restraints?" Shane pointed at the engineer. "That one assaulted my buddy." Miguel added, "They brought forged documents." Derek nudged the broken gate lock with his boot. "Forced entry." Lawson blinked once, then twice. He walked up to the engineer under Sam's hold. "Sam, you can let him up." Slowly, Sam loosened. The engineer scrambled up like a startled rat, brushing dirt off his vest. Before he could protest, Lawson raised a hand. Not a word. He turned to the guard holding the bullhorn. "IDs. All of you." No one disobeyed. Wallets appeared instantly. Hands trembled. Lawson checked each ID, typing names into his phone. He paused at one license. "You were fined in New Mexico for operating unlicensed private security and barred from enforcement work," the man stammered. I wasn't enforcing." "You're standing on private land with forged documents." Silence. Then Lawson asked the question. "Sent by who?" Nothing. Just shifting feet, darting eyes, collapsing confidence. Lawson didn't wait for an answer. He looked straight at the bullhorn guard and said, "Let me guess. Karen Glazer told you she'd cover the legal fees." The guard flinched, a full-body flinch. That was all the confirmation Lawson needed. He exhaled through his nose. "Spoiler alert," he muttered. "She won't." Then he pointed to the deputies pulling up behind his SUV. "Cuff them." The engineer who assaulted Sam protested immediately. "You can't arrest us." Lawson cut him off like a man closing a book he was tired of reading. "You touched a Marine. You cut a gate. You forged county documents. And you trespassed. You're lucky we're not adding resisting." The deputies moved in. Cuffs clicked shut. The HOA guards were marched toward the SUVs one by one. The engineer whimpered the whole way. Sam stood with arms crossed, calm as church marble. Miguel grinned. Shane smirked. Derek didn't smile. He simply rested a hand on my shoulder and said, "Yo, you're good now." And for the first time that day, I believed him. Once the cuffs clicked shut and the HOA guards were seated in the cruisers, Sheriff Lawson straightened his hat, rolled his shoulders like he was settling into a job he knew too well, and turned toward me. "Marcus, walk me through it." No panic, no raised voice. Just a man doing his job and doing it well. I nodded and gestured toward the open stretch of gravel. Started with a gate breach. That engineer used bolt cutters. My camera caught it all. Miguel already had the SD card ready. He handed it to Lawson like a medic passing off a vital sample. The sheriff slipped it into a labeled evidence pouch. Good, keep going. I pointed toward the clipboard on the ground. Then they presented that. Claimed it was a county expansion order. This time, Lawson didn't flip through it like before. He simply pulled a fresh evidence bag from his belt and slid the bent clipboard inside, sealing it with a firm press. He gave the visible typo one last glance through the plastic. That division line alone ought to get 5 years for stupidity, he muttered, not surprised, just disgusted at the amateur hour unfolding before him. Shane chuckled. Sam didn't react. Sam rarely reacts unless something is on fire. Lawson turned back to me. You said they claimed Karen sent them. I nodded. Her name came up the moment they panicked. Lawson nodded like a man connecting a final dot he'd been following for months. Yeah, she's been sniffing county borders like a bloodhound with bad paperwork. I figured she'd try something dumb, but this... He tapped the sealed clipboard. This is a new level of stupid. He walked to the HOA truck. Miguel, mind popping that tailgate for me? Miguel stepped over and pulled it open. We all stared. Survey maps. Spray paint. Flag stakes. A binder labeled PHASE2 expansion. Hard evidence they weren't improvising. They were executing a plan. Lawson photographed everything. Marcus, this wasn't outreach. They were prepping a land grab. I crossed my arms. I've got drone footage of them marking 30 feet past the line. Sam already sent it to the sheriff's phone. Lawson reviewed a few frames. Chain of evidence is clean. This ties all of it together. He shut the truck bed, turned to me again. I'll need a formal statement. Doesn't have to be poetic, just factual. I handed him the small green waterproof notebook I still carry out of habit. Already wrote it down. He scanned 2 lines with relief. Makes my job too easy. Behind us, one of the HOA guards groaned through the cruiser window. Karen said this was legal. She said the county approved. Lawson didn't even turn. County didn't approve anything but your arrest, he said flatly. Then he tucked my notebook under his arm. Marcus, I'm forwarding this to the district attorney today. Fake orders, gate breach, trespass, attempted coercion. This is enough dynamite to blow the whole HOA board apart. The bullhorn guard whimpered. She said she'd cover our legal fees. Lawson looked at him like a tired father listening to a kid lie about homework. Let me give you boys a free lesson. He leaned closer. Karen Glazer doesn't cover anything. She assigns blame, and she just found her scapegoats. The guard swallowed hard. Lawson stepped back toward his SUV. You better brace yourself, Marcus. This is just round 1. Round 2 is going to tear through North Hollow like a wildfire. I nodded. We're ready. The Marines stood behind me, silent, steady, immovable. The sheriff tapped the cruiser roof, signaling departure. Engines fired. Dust rolled. And I watched as the HOA guards were driven away, shrinking into the bend of the private road, just as the first crack in Karen Glazer's empire began to split open. The HOA convoy was barely out of sight when my phone buzzed. Not once, but in a steady stream. Notifications rolled down the screen like ticker tape. First one, sheriff just posted an incident notice. Holy hell, Marcus, what happened? Second, bro, 2 of your trespassers are in cuffs at the station right now. Third, from the Pine Creek Community Board, emergency HOA meeting scheduled. Topic, liability exposure. That last one made me smile. It didn't take long for the wildfire to spread. By midday, the Pine Creek Ledger had published the first article, HOA representatives arrested after alleged attempted land expansion, forged engineering orders discovered. Someone snapped a photo of the clipboard through the cruiser window, the typo visible, the lamination cheap, the desperation obvious. By evening, the North Hollow HOA Facebook group exploded. Dozens of comments poured in from homeowners who'd been fined, threatened, or harassed over the years. Karen's name appeared in every third sentence, not as a hero, but as a warning. One post read, "She told me my American flag was visually inconsistent. Guess trespassing is more consistent?" Another, I paid $850 in fines for a porch light she didn't like. Where does that money go? The answer was becoming clear. Into expansion plans that had no legal standing. By the time the sun dropped below the ridge, I'd received 17 text messages, 6 emails, and 1 phone call from my lawyer, Lorraine Chen. "Marcus," she said, tone half excited, half exasperated, "you do realize you just handed the county an airtight case against an entire HOA board?" "Wasn't planning it," I replied. "Just protecting my land." "Well, you're about to protect a lot of homeowners in the process. The DA wants to meet tomorrow." That night, Derek and the boys stayed. We sat on the porch under the stars, coffee replaced with something stronger. Miguel told a terrible joke about HOAs and haunted houses. Shane just shook his head. Sam stared at the fire. Derek finally spoke. "She's going to fight back. You know that, right?" I nodded. Let her. Because this time, she wasn't facing a lone homeowner. She was facing a paper trail, criminal charges, and a neighborhood finally willing to speak up. The first blow came faster than expected. 2 days after the arrest, the North Hollow HOA board called an emergency meeting. Mandatory attendance. Subject line, community safety and legal clarification. It was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the community clubhouse, a prefab building with cheap carpet and folding chairs that smelled like coffee and regret. I wasn't required to attend. I wasn't even a member. But Derek sent me a text at 5:30, going in, recording everything. By 6:15, he'd sent the first update. Place is packed. Standing room only. Everyone's pissed. At 6:20, another message. Karen just walked in. You should see the look she's getting. Then, at 6:43, the one that made me laugh out loud. She's trying to blame you. Saying you entrapped her employees. Crowd's not buying it. I poured another cup of coffee and waited. The full story came later that night when Derek returned, looking like a man who'd just watched a slow-motion train wreck. She walked in wearing that red blazer like she was about to give a TED Talk, he said, settling into a chair. Started with some speech about misunderstandings and rogue contractors. Shane, who'd gone with him, added, "She tried to say the guards acted without her knowledge." Miguel snorted. "Yeah, until someone pulled up the text thread she sent them." I raised an eyebrow. "Someone had that?" Derek grinned. "One of the guards. Turns out he kept screenshots, sent them to his lawyer, who sent them to the board." He pulled out his phone and showed me. The messages were damning. "Karen to guard. Proceed with entry if he refuses access. Claim county authority." Another. "Don't back down. He's isolated. No one will believe him over official documents. And the kicker, if this goes sideways, I'll handle legal fees. Just get me access to that land." I whistled low. "She put it in writing. She put everything in writing," Shane said. "Emails, texts, meeting notes. Woman documented her own felonies." Derek continued, "So this guy Doug, I think his name was, stands up in the middle of her speech and says, 'Karen, why did you tell us the county approved the expansion?'" She froze, Shane added, just stood there with her mouth open. "And then," Miguel said, barely containing laughter, "someone else asked about the $85,000 in consulting fees that went to a company registered at her address." The room went silent. Karen tried to pivot, claimed it was administrative overhead, legal consulting, standard procedure. But the crowd wasn't buying it. One woman stood up, elderly, soft-spoken, the kind who bakes cookies for neighbors. "You fined my husband $300 for a birdhouse," she said quietly. "Said it violated architectural guidelines. But there's no guideline about birdhouses. You just didn't like it." Another voice. "You threatened to foreclose on my house over a mailbox." Another. "You told me my son's wheelchair ramp was aesthetically inconsistent." The floodgates opened. Years of pent-up frustration poured out in a single meeting. Karen tried to regain control. She banged her gavel, a little wooden hammer she'd bought herself because the HOA bylaws didn't actually grant her one. "This is out of order," she shouted. But Doug, the quiet neighbor who'd brought me bourbon, stood up and said the thing everyone was thinking. No, Karen, you're out of order. You've been out of order for 3 years. The room erupted in applause. Karen's face turned the same shade as her blazer. I built this community, she screamed. I protected property values. I kept standards. You terrorized people, Doug said simply. And now you're just a liability. The board voted right there 6-1. Immediate suspension of her authority pending county investigation. Karen slammed her binder shut and stormed out, her heels clicking frantically, now no longer the sound of authority, but of retreat. She shouted that she'd sue everyone in the room, but no one chased her. No one defended her. They just watched her crimson blazer disappear through the doorway like a flag pulled down from a surrendered fortress. At 8:43 p.m., the HOA sent a mass email, effective immediately. Karen Glazer has stepped down from her position as president. North Hollow Estates will cooperate fully with county investigators. 3 minutes later, Doug himself texted me a photo of the clubhouse door. The HOA president nameplate was gone. Only screw holes remained. He ended the message with one line. Thought you'd appreciate the view. I did. I really did. The morning after Karen Glazer's fall from grace, Pine Creek tasted different. Not the weather, not the wind, but the quiet. It was real again, clean, like someone had finally swept the gravel road of all the noise that didn't belong. I woke before sunrise, made my coffee the same way I always do, slow pour, tin mug, steam rising against the cold. Then I stepped out onto the porch. From my ridgeline, I could see all 14 acres stretching out pine shadows pooling over the slope, the gully mist rolling soft and low, the kind of quiet a man earns, not inherits. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I didn't feel watched. No more engines, no more cheap security shirts pretending to be authority, no more clipboard clowns pacing along my fence, just land, my land, the way it was meant to be. Around mid-morning, my email pinged. Pine Creek Land Use Commission, determination notice. I opened it, half expecting more bureaucratic nonsense. Instead, I read one word, upheld, meaning my boundary, my deed, my rights, everything upheld unanimously. Attached was a summary. North Hollow Estates acted outside their jurisdiction. Their documents were fraudulent. Their agents trespassed. Their attempted expansion had no legal standing whatsoever.